The morning Clara Whitmore set out alone was supposed to be simple. Just a short ride beyond her father's ranch to check the fence line before winter storms rolled in. She saddled her chestnut mare with practiced ease, breathing in the crisp scent of juniper and wet earth. The sun hung low and pale, promising a gray day but not a dangerous one. Nothing about the morning warned her that her entire life was about to veer sharply into a future she never imagined. Clara had lived all of her 23 years on the edge of Arizona territory, where the land stretched out wide enough to swallow a person whole. She was comfortable with solitude, comfortable with the endless sky. But as she rode farther from home, a strange tension prickled through her, something she couldn't name but couldn't ignore. She didn't notice the figure on the ridge until her mare snorted and stopped short. Clara looked up sharply. A lone rider sat on a dark-coated Mustang, the horse half-shadowed by the rising light. When he urged the animal forward, emerging from the ridgeline, Clara recognized him instantly. Tahoma, the Apache scout known in dusty saloons and whispered rumors across every ranch for 20 miles. People claimed he could follow tracks through stone, that he rode harder than any military scout, that he kept to himself, that he trusted no one. Clara had seen him once before in town, silent and alone as he traded pelts for flour and salt. She remembered how the room had gone quieter when he stepped inside, not out of hostility, but because he carried the kind of calm strength that drew attention whether he wanted it or not. Now he rode straight toward her. Her pulse stumbled. She gripped the reins tighter but held her ground. Tahoma stopped his Mustang within a few paces of her. Wind lifted his midnight black hair off his shoulders, and his eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, swept over her and the trail behind her. "You shouldn't be out here alone." His voice was low, smooth, and somehow more alarming than comforting. Clara forced a breath. "I'm just checking the fence line. I'm not afraid of a morning ride." "You should be," he replied evenly. "There are tracks behind you, fresh ones." "Not yours." Clara's stomach tightened. She twisted in the saddle, scanning the ground, but saw nothing but dust and brush. Still, she trusted him more than her own eyes. Stories about his scouting skills weren't just stories. Before she could ask anything more, Tahoma angled his Mustang closer. "Your mare is tired. She won't outrun whoever's following." Clara didn't argue. She could hear the certainty in his tone. Her mare was breathing harder than she should have been for such a short ride. "Come," he said simply, extending his hand. "Ride with me." Clara stared at the broad, calloused hand held out toward her. She had ridden with her father, with ranch hands, with neighbors, but never pressed against the back of a man whose strength felt like part of the land itself. Her heartbeat skittered nervously, but danger outweighed hesitation. She nodded once. Tahoma swung down from his Mustang and helped her dismount, his grip firm and sure around her waist. Then, with a single smooth motion, he lifted her onto the front of his saddle. She gasped. His Mustang stood taller and more powerfully built than any horse she'd ridden before. She immediately felt unsteady. Tahoma mounted behind her, one arm circling her just enough to reach the reins. The warmth of him spread through her like wildfire. His chest brushed her back solid, unmoving, grounding. She tried to sit straight, tried to hide her reaction, but her breath still lodged high in her throat. The moment the Mustang moved, she whispered before she could stop herself, "I've never ridden like this." Tahoma leaned in just slightly, his breath warm at the side of her ear. "You're safe," he murmured. "I won't let you fall." Then he urged the Mustang forward, and the world changed. The horse surged into an easy but powerful lope, gliding across the widening canyon trail with a confidence Clara had never felt beneath her. Every stride pulled her closer against Tahoma's steady form. Every shift of his body guided the Mustang, and she felt the strength in him with every breath he took. Wind swept her hair back. The world blurred to gold and red and sage, but most startling of all was the feeling blooming inside her chest. Trust. Trust in a man she barely knew. Trust in the way he held her. Trust in the sense that, for reasons she didn't yet understand, Tahoma had decided to protect her, and somehow, that meant she wasn't alone anymore. The sky began to darken long before midday, turning the red cliffs into looming silhouettes. Clara felt the shift in the air, the sudden chill, the heaviness that pushed down on her shoulders as the first rumble of distant thunder rolled across the desert. Tahoma noticed it before she did. She felt it in the way his posture changed behind her, more alert, more purposeful. "We'll need shelter soon," he murmured. "The storm will break fast." Clara glanced up at the dark boiling clouds. "That doesn't look like an ordinary rain." "It isn't." His voice held quiet certainty. "Monsoon storms come like a blade, quick and cutting." As if to prove him right, a sharp cold wind swept down the canyon, lashing Clara's cheeks and sending her hair stinging across her face. The mustang snorted nervously, tossing its head. Tahoma steadied the animal with a calm hand and nudged it into a faster pace. Clara clutched the saddle horn as they shot forward. She could feel the tension coiling in Tahoma's body, a readiness that both frightened and reassured her. She had never ridden in weather like this. Rain back home was gentle, predictable, almost polite. This storm felt wild, ancient, alive. The kind that could swallow travelers whole. Thunder cracked overhead, closer this time. Clara flinched. Tahoma's arm instinctively tightened around her waist, pulling her securely against him. "Easy," he said, his voice steady even as lightning forked across the sky. "You're with me." They rode hard through rising winds until Tahoma suddenly steered the Mustang off the trail and toward a small cluster of boulders. At first Clara didn't see anything but rock and brush until the Mustang slipped between two jagged outcrops and a weathered structure appeared beyond them, a narrow line shack. Abandoned, but standing. Tahoma slid off the saddle with the grace of someone who'd been riding since birth. He helped Clara down, keeping her steady as the wind whipped around them. Rain began to fall in violent, slanted sheets. "Hurry," he said. They stumbled inside just as the storm broke open fully. Rain hammered the roof like fists. Wind rattled the warped wooden shutters. Dust swirled around the floorboards. The small room contained nothing but a broken table, an old trunk, and a stone hearth. It was cold, very cold. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Her shirt clung to her skin, already damp. Tahoma glanced at her briefly, just one flick of his dark eyes, but there was something warm in that look, something that made her breath catch. Without speaking, he knelt at the hearth and began building a fire. Clara watched him work with quick, skilled movements, stacking wood, striking flint, coaxing sparks to life. Even the simple task held a quiet confidence she found unexpectedly captivating. When the first flame flickered, licking the air, the ice in her bones loosened a little. "You should sit," he said softly. "The cold will take you if you don't." Clara moved closer to the hearth and lowered herself beside it. Heat spilled over her face and hands. Tahoma stood and unfastened a wool blanket rolled behind his saddle. He shook off the dust and draped it around her shoulders without ceremony. His fingers brushed her collarbone only for a moment. Barely a touch, but the warmth that shot through her had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and settled opposite her by the flames, his legs folded calmly beneath him. Shadows flickered across his strong features, high cheekbones, firm jaw, the slight scar at the corner of his mouth. He looked carved by the land itself. "It's dangerous country today," he said. "Storms like this hide more than rain." Clara swallowed. "You mean the men who were following me?" "Yes." His gaze met hers directly, openly. "They weren't just passing through. They were tracking you. Why? She breathed, her voice thin. Tahoma studied her for a long moment. The fire crackled between them. They knew who you were, he said quietly. They knew you'd be alone. And they knew your father has the strongest horses in the county. Clara's blood ran cold. And you just found me? She asked, though something in her already knew the truth. No. His voice deepened. I came looking. Her heart thudded painfully. He looked away then, staring into the fire as if choosing his words carefully. People talk in town more than they work. I heard trouble was coming. I knew you'd ride out early, just like you do every season. So I followed the trail before they could. Clara's lips parted. Why? The question hung between them, suspended in the firelight. Tahoma didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed slightly, as if he were weighing truth against silence. Finally, he said, because someone needed to protect you. And no one else was riding fast enough. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Inside, Clara felt something shift, something quiet, powerful, and deeply confusing. The storm no longer felt like the most dangerous thing in the room, not with Tahoma watching her the way he was. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the canyon glistening with wet stone and streams of water winding through dusty tracks. Clara stepped outside the line shack, inhaling the crisp, clean air. The world seemed new, polished, almost impossibly vast. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the cliffs in brilliant amber and rose. For a moment, she forgot the danger from yesterday or the intensity of the man who had saved her. Tahoma sat atop his Mustang nearby, watching her with calm, unreadable eyes. He always seemed a part of the landscape, like he had grown out of the earth itself. Every muscle in his body exuded controlled power, and yet there was a strange softness when he looked at her. Clara's stomach tightened. You shouldn't wander alone, he said, his voice low but firm. I know, she admitted, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. I'll be more careful. Tahoma studied her for a moment before speaking again. People talk, he said, almost casually, about who I am. Clara turned to him sharply. I've heard stories. You have? His eyes darkened, not in anger, but something heavier, history perhaps, or warning. And what do you believe? Clara hesitated. That. People exaggerate. That you're dangerous. Tahoma's lips quirked slightly, a ghost of a smile. I am dangerous if someone needs teaching, yes. But I do not harm without reason. Most fear me because I do not answer to their rules. I follow my own. Clara found herself intrigued despite the wary edge of fear in her chest. There was something magnetic about him, not just his skill with a horse, or his knowledge of the land, but the way he carried himself, like he owed nothing to anyone and yet could protect anyone who needed him. It unsettled her in a thrilling way. She shifted slightly, studying his strong profile against the morning sun. People say you won't marry, she said softly, almost hesitantly. That you've been promised once, and lost your chance. Tahoma's eyes flickered briefly away, betraying a shadow of memory. Yes, he said quietly. I was once promised to a woman from my people. She married another. Since then, I have made no promises. People say I never will. Clara swallowed hard, her mind racing. She couldn't imagine why a man like Tahoma, strong, fearless, untouchable, would ever need someone else. And yet, as she watched him, she noticed the faint tension around his jaw, the slight curve of loneliness at the edges of his eyes. For a moment, she saw a man shaped by love lost, by boundaries he had set to protect himself. She felt a flutter of sympathy mixed with curiosity, and something sharper she refused to name. You're human, she said softly. Not just some legend. Tahoma turned his gaze fully on her, as if her words startled him. Human, he repeated, almost as if testing the word on his tongue. Then he looked away, his eyes scanning the canyon as if to remind himself of where he belonged. Yes, but do not mistake that for weakness. Clara nodded, though her pulse raced. There was a danger in him, a wildness that no one could deny. And yet, she felt drawn to him, inexplicably and irrevocably. She had trusted him yesterday in the storm, when fear had been sharp and the world had threatened to swallow her whole. She had ridden with him, pressed against his chest, and had never felt safer in her life. How could a man so feared, so untamed, inspire such complete trust? Tahoma's hand moved slightly, brushing against the reins, and for a brief second, the air between them seemed charged with unspoken words. Clara realized she was watching him as intently as he watched her, and that perhaps, for the first time, she was seeing past the reputation to the man himself. The man who had saved her, protected her, and remained a mystery she ached to understand. "You are brave," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. Most would have turned back after the first sign of danger. Clara's lips parted. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I trusted you." He gave a small nod, not a gesture of superiority, but of acknowledgement. "Good. Trust is hard-earned." Clara's heart beat faster. She realized that, for the first time, she wanted to know more than just the legend. She wanted to know him. Not the dangerous warrior. Not the man everyone feared, but Tahoma, the man who had ridden through the storm to keep her alive, the man who held power yet offered protection. And somehow, the thought of being near him, riding with him, speaking with him, even sharing a fire felt like the beginning of something she hadn't expected to feel in the harsh, untamed land of the Arizona Territory. Hope. The next few days were a blur of cautious movement. Tahoma led Clara carefully through the canyon trails, their progress slow but deliberate, each step measured against the risk of discovery. Clara tried to appear composed, but every shadow, every distant echo of hoofbeats made her pulse spike. She could see the tension in Tahoma's jaw, the way his dark eyes never stopped scanning, always calculating. He was a man accustomed to danger and to surviving it, but now she felt herself a part of it, unwillingly. Undeniably, they had settled in a small, hidden glade for the night. The horses tethered behind the rocks, munching on sparse brush. Tahoma built a fire with the efficiency of a man who had done it 1,000 times. Clara, sitting a short distance away, watched him, fascinated by the quiet authority in his movements. Every gesture was purposeful, every glance measured. Yet, for all the control he exuded, she noticed the subtle ways he flinched at distant noises, the taut line of his shoulders, the barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. Danger was never far from him. "You must be tired," he said, his deep voice breaking the silence. "You've been riding harder than you realize." Clara shook her head. "I've ridden before," she said, though the words rang hollow. Nothing in her life had prepared her for riding with Tahoma. The sensation of the horse's powerful muscles beneath her, the wind whipping across her face, the sense of raw danger everywhere, it was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Tahoma studied her quietly, then leaned closer. "You're brave, but bravery can get people killed." Her lips parted, unsure whether to be offended or comforted. Before she could respond, a sharp, low whistle cut through the still night. Horses snorted, and the shadows of moving men appeared along the ridge above. Clara's stomach twisted. Outlaws. And they were close. "They've found us," Tahoma said calmly, though his hands were already moving. He swung a blanket over Clara's shoulders and motioned for her to crouch. "Stay low. Don't move until I tell you." The outlaws moved quickly, but Tahoma was faster. Within seconds, he had assessed their numbers 3 men and their weapons, rough but dangerous. Clara watched as he positioned himself protectively in front of her, a shield made of muscle and silent intensity. Every instinct in her screamed to flee, but she didn't. She trusted him. And in that trust, she felt a strange sense of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Quiet," Tahoma murmured, "and follow my lead." The men advanced, confident, unaware of the trap. Tahoma waited until they were within a critical range, then struck. He moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior, disarming one man with a swift flick of his wrist, pushing another into the dirt with a force that left Clara's heart in her throat. She had never seen such controlled violence, and yet it was not cruelty, it was necessity. He protected, he defended, he ensured that neither she nor his Mustang would be harmed. But the last man, seeing the chaos, raised his weapon toward her. Clara's hands trembled, and before she could even think, she grabbed Tahoma's spare rifle, pointed it shakily, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing through the canyon, startling the man enough that he fell back, tripping over a rock. Tahoma's dark eyes met hers. For a long moment, there was no need for words. The danger had passed, and yet the weight of what had just happened lingered between them. Clara's hand shook, and Tahoma gently reached for her, steadying her. "You did well," he said softly, his voice almost a caress in the quiet after the chaos. Her breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't think I could." "You were braver than you realized," he interrupted. "And that is why you are here, alive." Clara felt something she could not name: relief, pride, fear, and a startling, overwhelming connection to the man beside her. She had watched him fight, protect, and care in ways that words could not describe. And in that moment, she realized how much she depended on him, how much she trusted him, and how deeply she was drawn to him. The sun began to rise, painting the canyon in golden light. Tahoma helped her to her feet, guiding her to the Mustang. She felt the weight of the morning's events pressing down on her, yet also a thrilling sense of exhilaration. Danger had brought them closer, and in that closeness, something unspoken began to form a bond neither of them could ignore. As they rode onward, Clara clung slightly to him, aware of his presence in a way she had never been aware of any man. He didn't comment, didn't correct her. He simply rode beside her, a guardian and companion. The danger behind them only a reminder of how fiercely he could protect what he cared for. And for the first time, Clara allowed herself to hope, not just for safety, but for something more. Something she could never have imagined when she had first saddled her mare that morning. By mid-morning, the canyon opened into a wide overlook, the cliffs plunging sharply into a valley painted with wildflowers and sunlit streams. Clara's chest still heaved from the previous night's ordeal, but the beauty of the landscape momentarily distracted her. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe freely, to drink in the sweeping vistas. The quiet here was almost surreal after the danger of the canyon trails and the outlaws' attack. Tahoma guided his Mustang to the edge of the cliff, reins loose but hands steady. Clara watched him, captivated by his presence. Even after the night's chaos, he seemed uncheckable. A man carved from the land itself, unyielding yet at ease in this wild, untamed place. "You've ridden well," he said, voice calm but carrying a weight that made her heart skip. "Better than I expected." Clara swallowed. I didn't think I could manage it." She glanced down at the sheer drop below, then back at him. "But I trusted you, always." Tahoma's dark eyes softened. He shifted slightly closer behind her on the horse, and she felt the warmth radiating from him. The closeness made her pulse quicken, a confusing mixture of safety and something electric she had never experienced. He spoke low, almost reverently, as if each word were carefully chosen. "Trust isn't given lightly," he said. "Most people would have panicked, turned back, or worse. But not you." You rode with me like you belonged here." Clara's lips parted in surprise. "Belonged here? I'm just a woman from a ranch. You've never ridden like this," he interrupted gently, completing her thought before she could finish. His hand brushed her shoulder, a brief but deliberate contact that sent a shiver through her. "But you have courage, more than most. And courage is rare." The wind swept across the canyon, tousling her hair, carrying the scent of pine, wet earth, and something uniquely him. Clara's heartbeat thundered in her chest. She had never felt so intensely alive, so aware of a single presence beside her. The world narrowed to him, his steady eyes, his strong, calm voice, the subtle warmth of his body against hers. Tahoma's gaze lingered, his expression unreadable, yet filled with a depth that made Clara's stomach flutter. "I have not wanted a woman by my side in many seasons," he said quietly, "not since the one I lost. But seeing you now, riding with me, I feel differently." Clara's breath caught. Her pulse raced. You mean?" He didn't answer with words at first. He simply turned his head slightly, and his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her knees weaken. Every unspoken thought, every hidden feeling, seemed to hang between them, unbroken by the wind or the vast expanse of the canyon. "Finally," he said, in a voice that was almost a whisper yet carried across the rocks, "I would have you with me, Clara, not just now, not just for a moment, but always." Her breath hitched. The canyon, the horses, the lingering danger of the past day, it all seemed to fade away in that moment, leaving only him and the electricity in the space between them. She realized that she had not only trusted him but had begun to need him in ways she hadn't understood until now. She faltered, words failing her. She could not articulate the storm of emotions rising inside her. Relief, desire, fear. Every feeling collided, raw and unfiltered. And yet, despite the chaos inside, there was clarity too. She wanted to be with him, to trust him completely, to surrender to the bond that had been forming since the first wild ride. Tahoma reached a hand toward her, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "I know this may seem sudden," he said, his voice low and intimate, "but I cannot ignore it. You've changed something in me, and I will not waste time questioning it. I am offering you." "Ma." Clara's heart pounded against her chest. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I want that too." A faint smile curved his lips, almost hidden, almost reluctant. He didn't pull her into an embrace, not yet, but the intensity of his gaze, the firmness of his hand still resting near hers, conveyed more than words ever could. The wind carried their silence across the canyon, a sacred acknowledgement of connection, of trust, of something far deeper than either of them had expected. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the cliffs in warm gold, Clara felt an unspoken promise settle in her heart. This was only the beginning. The sun was climbing higher over the canyon, casting long, sharp shadows across the winding trails. When Clara sensed the change first, it was subtle, a shift in the wind, a distant clatter that didn't belong to the usual sounds of wildlife. Her pulse quickened and she glanced at Tahoma. He had already noticed. His body tensed, every muscle coiled and ready. "They're close," he murmured, voice low, calm, yet edged with steel. "Stay behind me." Clara's stomach nodded, and though fear rippled through her, she obeyed without question. She knew that with him she had a chance. Without him, she would be defenseless. The canyon walls echoed faintly with the sound of hooves quick, purposeful, closing in. Outlaws? She remembered the night of the storm, the gunfire, the chaos. The memory made her hands sweat. Tahoma scanned the terrain swiftly, eyes moving like a hawk's, reading the shapes of shadows, the subtle shifts in the dust. 3 men, he said quietly. They mean trouble. Clara's breath caught. She had never seen anyone so calm in the face of danger. Even now, the only thing that betrayed his awareness of risk was the set of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze. She felt an odd mixture of awe and fear. Realizing just how dangerous these men could be and how capable he was of keeping her safe, the outlaws appeared over a ridge suddenly, their guns glinting in the sunlight. Their confidence was evident, but so was Tahoma's resolve. Without hesitation, he positioned himself between Clara and the attackers, his broad frame shielding her from view. Every instinct he had was focused on her safety. Move slowly, he instructed, nodding toward the rocks for cover. Stay quiet. Follow my lead. The men advanced, their movements deliberate and threatening. Tahoma waited until they were within striking distance, and then he acted with the precision of a man who had survived countless confrontations. One quick motion disarmed the first man, sending his gun skittering across the rocks. Another outstretched arm forced a second man to the ground, his balance lost to Tahoma's skillful push. Clara's heart pounded as she watched, a mixture of terror and admiration surging through her dot. Then the last man lunged, desperate, and his gun leveled toward her. Panic surged in Clara's chest, but Tahoma's hand brushed hers, steadying her. Do not hesitate, he said, eyes locked on the attacker. You can do this. Clara's fingers trembled as she lifted the spare rifle Tahoma had left her. She had never fired a gun in real combat, never faced life or death stakes. But instinct took over the urgency, the fear, the desire to survive. She squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and piercing, and the man fell back, startled and off balance. The threat was over as quickly as it had begun. Tahoma moved to her side immediately, steadying her hands and looking her over for injuries. You did well, he said, his voice quiet, almost tender. Braver than I expected. Clara's hands were still shaking. She looked at him, wide-eyed. I didn't think I could. You did, he interrupted softly. His dark eyes held hers, unwavering. And that is why you are alive. For a long moment, they stood together, the echoes of danger lingering in the canyon like a fading shadow. Clara's chest heaved, but she felt a rush of exhilaration that mingled with her fear. She had faced death, and she had survived not alone, but with him. And in that shared survival, something unspoken had begun to form between them, trust, respect, and a bond forged in the fire of danger. The outlaw's retreating dust stirred faintly in the canyon breeze. Tahoma guided her toward the horses, his hand firm at her waist, protecting, guiding, reassuring. Clara's heart swelled not only with gratitude but with a growing realization of how deeply she depended on him. You saved me, she whispered, almost breathless. Tahoma's eyes softened. We saved each other, he said. And you were braver than you knew. Remember that. The morning sun bathed the canyon in warm light, and Clara felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Danger had drawn them closer than words ever could. She realized, in a way that startled her, that she was no longer simply drawn to Tahoma for his strength or skill. She was drawn to him for who he was, steady, protective, and yet quietly human, with a depth that few could see or understand as they rode onward. The canyon opening before them like a vast promise. Clara felt a strange certainty settle in her chest. Danger might follow them, storms might rage, and outlaws might lurk, but with Tahoma by her side, she could face it all. And perhaps, she thought with a small, shy smile, she wanted to face more than just danger with him. The village lay quiet under the late afternoon sun, a cluster of adobe homes and communal spaces nestled against the sandstone cliffs. The elders moved deliberately, Their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect as they gathered around Tahoma and Clara. The small crowd did not speak at first, merely observing, as if trying to measure whether the woman who had ridden with Tahoma, faced danger, and survived, was worthy in their eyes. Clara felt the weight of their gazes. Though she had endured storms, outlaws, and treacherous canyon paths, she had never been so acutely aware of being judged. Her pulse quickened. She glanced at Tahoma, who stood tall beside her, his posture calm, steady, and unwavering. The mere presence of him gave her courage. Every muscle in his body spoke of strength, yet there was a tenderness in the way he subtly positioned himself between her and the elders, a silent promise of protection. The head elder, a man with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of desert sun, stepped forward. His voice was gentle but firm, carrying the weight of tradition. Tahoma, you have returned with a woman. Tell us of her courage, her heart, and her intent. Tahoma's dark eyes met Clara's, seeking hers for reassurance, acknowledgement, and consent. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. She trusted him completely, and in that trust, she felt the courage to speak. She is brave, Tahoma said clearly, his voice resonating with authority. She faced the canyon trails and the storm with strength. She has protected herself and others when danger arose. Her heart is honest, her spirit unyielding. And he hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued with conviction. I wish for her to stand with me, not just for this journey, but for life. I wish for her to be my wife. The elders exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Then one nodded slowly, another murmured approval under his breath. Clara's stomach tightened with anticipation. She had heard of such traditions but never imagined she would be a part of one. Tahoma turned toward her fully, kneeling slightly on one knee, not in a gesture of supplication but in the way of his people, a deep, meaningful symbol of respect and intention. Clara Whitmore, he said softly, yet every word carried power. In my people's way, a woman who guards a man's life, who rides with courage and faces the wild with strength, is already tied to his spirit. If you accept, I would make you my wife, not just in word, but in heart and in tradition. Clara's lips trembled. The gravity of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, and the surrounding elders watching reverently created a moment suspended in time. She felt the warmth of his hand near hers, steady, reassuring, patient. The connection they had forged in the canyon, through danger and trust, now culminated in this moment of possibility. Her own heart pounded, echoing through her chest like distant drumbeats. She thought of the ride through the storm, the fire in the line shack, the outlaws at dawn, and the countless small moments in between that had drawn them together. Every memory, every glance, every touch had led to this decision. I accept, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to reveal the depth of her emotions. I want to be with you. Tahoma's eyes softened, and for a moment, the rugged, untamed warrior seemed almost vulnerable, his relief and joy hidden beneath his composed exterior. He rose slightly, lifting her hand gently in his. The elders nodded, murmuring their approval and blessings. One elder spoke softly, "The bond is honored. The spirits will guide you both." Tahoma's hand lingered over hers, a promise unspoken yet deeply understood. Clara felt a rush of emotion, the culmination of fear, relief, excitement, and love converging in a single breathtaking instant. She realized that this man, feared and revered by others, had chosen her not for convenience, not for appearance, but because of the courage and heart she had shown. The sun dipped lower, bathing the village and canyon in golden light. For Clara, the world seemed brighter, more vivid than ever. Danger, trials, and fear had shaped her path, but now, with Tahoma beside her, She felt the certainty of belonging, of love, and of a future intertwined with his dot, and though the canyon trails, storms, and dangers might await them still, Clara knew without doubt that together they could face anything. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the canyon cliffs in a wash of gold and rose. The village was alive with quiet activity, elders moving with deliberate steps, children peering from doorways, and the faint stir of horses grazing nearby. But Clara felt none of the bustle. Her attention was entirely on Tahoma, standing tall beside his Mustang, his dark eyes meeting hers with a depth of emotion that left her breathless. Today was different. Today they would ride together, not just through the canyon trails, not just against storms and outlaws, but into a future that belonged to both of them. The elders had blessed their union. Tahoma had chosen her, not as a fleeting companion, but as his wife. And Clara, after all she had endured, all she had felt and learned, was ready to embrace that choice fully. Tahoma extended a hand to her, and she took it without hesitation. His touch was strong, steady, and reassuring. He lifted her effortlessly onto the saddle of his Mustang. The horse was broad and powerful, muscles rippling beneath them. Clara felt the familiar thrill, the one she had first experienced on that wild ride through the canyon, but this time it was different. This time it was shared, a rhythm they would follow together. As Tahoma swung up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, Clara felt the warmth of his chest against her back. She inhaled the faint scent of leather, horse, and something uniquely him-earthy and reassuring. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation. The ride ahead was no longer a test of survival. It was a journey into life, love, and partnership. The Mustang surged forward, strong and sure, hooves thundering against the trail. Clara clutched the reins, leaning slightly into Tahoma's steady form, feeling his strength guide every motion. The canyon opened before them, the trail stretching into valleys and ridges that seemed endless, promising adventure, safety, and freedom. "You feel that?" Tahoma murmured into her ear. "The world is ours to ride." Clara laughed softly, breathless with exhilaration. "I've never ridden like this," she admitted, the words a whisper of memory and acknowledgement. "And yet, I've never wanted to ride like this with anyone before." His grip around her tightened, a subtle, grounding reminder that she was not alone. "Then ride with me," he said, voice low and steady. "Ride with me always." They rode through the canyon trails, the wind whipping past them, the sunlight dancing across rock faces. The world felt vast, endless, and alive. Clara realized that every fear, every danger, every storm she had endured had led her to this moment. She had faced the wild, the unknown, and the perils of the territory, and she had survived, not only physically, but emotionally, growing stronger with every step beside Tahoma. The bond between them was more than trust. It was partnership. It was understanding. It was the kind of connection that could not be broken by storms, outlaws, or distance. Every glance he gave her, every subtle touch, every whispered word reminded her that they had chosen each other willingly, completely, and without reservation. As they emerged from the canyon into the open plains, the horizon stretched endlessly before them. Tahoma slowed the Mustang, turning his head slightly so his eyes met hers. There was no need for words. She could feel the promise in his gaze. The commitment, the love that had grown quietly but fiercely over the past days. Clara leaned back slightly against him, inhaling the morning air, feeling the warmth of his presence, the strength of his arms, and the undeniable certainty of their union. She realized that the trails ahead, no matter how treacherous or unpredictable, would be navigable because they would ride them together. Tahoma nudged the horse forward again, and they rode side by side, not just through the canyon trails, but into a life full of possibilities. Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of joy, relief, and love. The world stretched before them wild, untamed and breathtaking, and now with Tahoma at her side, she was ready to face it all. "You're safe," he whispered once more, his lips brushing her ear. "And now, you're mine." Clara smiled, laughter bubbling freely. "And you're mine," she replied, the words carrying the promise of all that lay ahead. Together. They rode into the horizon, the canyon cliffs fading behind them, the open plains beckoning ahead. Danger, storms, and trials would come again, but for now they had each other. And that was enough. For Clara Whitmore and Tahoma, the Apache scout, the wild trails of the Arizona Territory had led not just to survival, but to love, partnership, and a future neither had dared to imagine until now.